Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Munchetti.
Our headlines today. Dame Barbara Windsor, star of EastEnders and the Carry On films, has died at the age of 83.
The actress was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 6 years ago. Throughout Breakfast, we'll look back at her life and career.
Pupils at secondary schools in parts of London, Kent and Essex are to get COVID tests in an attempt to curb a rapid rise in infections.
Secondary students in Wales are sent home and will do classes online from Monday.
Boris Johnson says there is now a strong possibility that the UK will not agree a post-Brexit trade deal with the EU.
Good morning. Quarantine from the Canaries. Travellers returning from the Spanish islands will have to isolate for 14 days from tomorrow. That's as the travel giant TUI warns it may cancel its entire Christmas schedule.
Good morning. It's 5 out of 5 in the Europa League, with all the British teams in action last night winning their final games before the knockout phase, and Tottenham, among those, topping their groups.
And rain will not be too far away from us over the next few days. Today, wettest conditions in eastern Scotland, but at least there'll be a little bit of sunshine to the south and west. I'll have all your details here on Breakfast.
Good morning. It's Friday, the 11th of December. Our top story this morning. Dame Barbara Windsor, one of the country's best-loved actresses, has died at the age of 83. Her husband, Scott Mitchell, said she passed away peacefully from Alzheimer's at a care home in London last night.
He said her final weeks were typical of how she lived her life, full of humour, drama and a fighting spirit until the end. David Silito looks back at her life.
That'll do. All right, girls, get in the coach and we'll get on with the loading.
Barbara Windsor, a 4-foot 10-inch national treasure.
So we were told to bring the minimum of clothing.
Now really, let's see those chests come out. And fling! And
Funny, cheeky, slightly naughty.
And fling!
But there was a lot more to her than just carry on camping.
Matron, take them away.
Barbara Ann Deeks began acting as a teenager. Born in Shoreditch in London, the daughter of a barrow boy, it was Joan Littlewood of the Theatre Workshop who saw her star quality. She won a Bafta nomination for the film Sparrows Can't Sing and a Tony for Oh What a Lovely Wall. Movies and cabaret introduced her to glamour and some shady friends. At one point, she dated the gangster Reggie Cray. But it was the Carry On films that made her a star.
Hi.
Her entrance, always an excuse for something slightly saucy.
Sorry. Have you got a large one?
I've had no complaints so far.
Especially if Sir James was around, a relationship that carried on off camera.
Quick before somebody comes in.
You haven't got any soap on that bit?
Up to the West End, right in.
But after those 9 Carry On films, there were some lean years, until she found Peggy.
Mum, I heard you were back. I was going to give you a call.
Well, why didn't you use this great lump?
Peggy Mitchell in EastEnders, the new landlady of the Queen Vic, was a role made for her.
You're unfit to be a father! Don't you dare turn your back on me!
22 years on Albert Square.
Get out of my pub!
Which ended with Barbara becoming Dame Barbara.
Well, Dame Barb sounds nice, doesn't it? You know, but my mum would like it to be Dame Barbara. She was a bit of a snob, cockney snob, my mum, so it would be Dame Barbara. God, what would she be thinking now? What would she be thinking?
However, her farewell to Walford was also her farewell to acting. She had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Oh, my dear friend.
Dame Barbara Windsor.
You won't never leave me, will you?
Talent, warmth.
No, sweetheart.
And a lifetime.
Thank you.
Of cheeky fun.
Secondary school pupils in parts of London, Essex and Kent will be offered mass testing in an effort to control the spread of coronavirus.
It comes as secondary school students in Wales prepare to take their classes online from the end of today after a significant rise in infections there. Anna O'Neill has this story.
Out of an actual real GCSE question.
Secondary school pupils in the classroom in Wales, but not for long. From Monday until the new year, they'll be doing their learning at home, online. The public health situation there is deteriorating, putting the NHS under pressure. One of the largest teaching unions in Wales welcomed the news to keep students at home for now.
A few days ago, there was a report by the Technical Advisory Group, which effectively, when you boiled it down, was telling parents that if they wanted a Christmas which was without self-isolation, they should take their children out of school. And we've found from our members telling us that large numbers of parents were beginning to do that.
Cases among young people in the southeast of England are also on the rise. At last night's news conference, the Health Minister said he was particularly concerned about London, where rates are up in 31 out of 32 boroughs.
We know from experience that a sharp rise in cases in younger people can lead to a rise amongst more vulnerable age groups later. We've seen that happen before. So we need to do everything we can to stop the spread amongst school-age children in London right now.
In Havering, there are 379 cases per 100,000 people. In Waltham Forest, it's 317, and 311 per 100,000 people in Barking and Dagenham. And so last night the government announced an immediate plan for testing all secondary school-aged children in the 7 worst affected boroughs of London, as well as parts of Essex that border it and parts of Kent. The leader of Barking and Dagenham welcomed the news.
We're looking forward to being able to use the additional resources we need to make sure we keep our young people as safe as possible. And at the same time, we're also making sure that every teacher gets tested before they leave the term, which is good, and they will go home with a home test, which will allow them to test before they have to come back at the start of the new term.
There are concerns that unless the rates in London start to fall, the capital is heading for a move from Tier 2 into Tier 3 next week, just before the Christmas relaxation of restrictions, something London's leaders are keen to avoid. Anna O'Neill, BBC News.
In Northern Ireland, shops, gyms and some hospitality businesses are reopening after a 2-week lockdown. Restaurants, cafes and other venues serving food can resume trading, but pubs that don't serve food must remain shut. Hairdressers, barbers and beauty salons can reopen, but visits to them are by appointment only.
Some restrictions are also easing in parts of Scotland today, where more than 2 million people have been under the country's toughest lockdown rules for 3 weeks. Non-essential shops and gyms will reopen across much of the west of the country, including Glasgow. Pubs and restaurants will remain closed until tomorrow.
The public spending watchdog has strongly criticised the coronavirus test and trace service in England, which has a budget of £22 billion.
The National Audit Office said in the early stages of the programme, some contact tracers were busy for just 1% of their paid hours. The government said more recent performance figures had improved, as Jim Reid reports.
This report covers the time up to the start of November as England entered a second wave of the pandemic. On testing, it says plans were not in place to deal with the spike in cases as schools and universities reopened. At a drive-in site like this, the aim was to return results in 24 hours, but by early November, just 38% of tests met that target. Then there was a second key task: to trace anyone an infected person had been in contact with and tell them to self-isolate. Here again, the report is critical, saying too few people were called by tracers and it took too long to find those who were.
Test and Trace had a target for in-person tests in the community to get all of them back within 24 hours. In the period we looked at from May to October, it only managed to get 41% back within that time frame. So it needs to look at the speed of what it's doing.
More recent figures do appear to show the system is improving, but there have been changes in the way some data are recorded, making comparisons difficult. The government says it now plans to work more closely with local council teams to stop clusters of cases growing into outbreaks. The budget for Test and Trace this year, though, is £22 billion, or £950 for each household. The watchdog says it must do more to justify that at a time when cases are rising across the country. Jim Reid, BBC News.
Boris Johnson says there's now a strong possibility of leaving the EU's single market and customs union without a trade deal.
The Prime Minister says he's willing to talk to EU leaders at any time, but has warned the public and businesses to be prepared for a no-deal scenario.
Well, let's speak to our Brussels correspondent, Nick Beake. Good morning to you, Nick. So we're in this curious position, to say the least, right now, where, in theory, the negotiators go back into the room together and carry on talking, but their political leaders have sketched out a situation which is bleak in terms of coming to a deal in the coming days.
Morning, Charlie. Absolutely right. Very strange situation we've got, because on the one hand, the negotiators will be talking again today in Brussels. This is the first of 3 days left if the leaders and the two sides are to be believed. They say they've got Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And at that point, if they haven't reached a decision, well, that's it. But clearly we know that Brexit deadlines come and go. So they've got 72 hours to try and do something they haven't been able to do for months. But yes, all the talk, certainly from Boris Johnson yesterday, in the strongest terms we've heard yet, is that people should be preparing for a no deal. Now, what did the European countries make of this? They've got a big summit at the moment. You've got 27 leaders meeting here in Brussels. Well, I've got to tell you, last night they were talking for hours and hours. They were up until the early hours talking about COVID and climate change and other things. So we haven't heard the likes of President Macron of France or Angela Merkel of Germany respond to these very strong words from Boris Johnson. We do know that the European Commission has been publishing emergency plans, though, if there is no deal, to try and keep planes moving and lorries moving between both sides, and also a proposal to protect fishing communities in the future for a 1 year period. The thing is, the UK government is saying it's looking at these ideas because even if there is no deal, it does not want to be tied to EU rules. So it's really complicated and a busy few days yet again, Charlie.
Nick, thanks very much.
Now, a panel of experts in the United States has endorsed the Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine for emergency use. This week, Britain became the first Western country to use it, with Canada preparing to follow suit. The Food and Drug Administration's vaccine chief is expected to give the final approval in the coming days.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.